We are hurtling toward the day when climate change could be irreversible.
Rising sea levels already altering this nation's coast.
China's capital is choking in its worst pollution of the year.
5% of species will become extinct.
Sea levels rising, glaciers melting.
If we do nothing, the picture of the world is one of absolute devastation.
There's no convincing scientific evidence for man-made climate change.
We're spewing 162 million tons of human-caused global warming pollution into it every single day, as if this is an open sewer.
Satellite data demonstrate for the last 17 years, there's been zero warming, none whatsoever. It's why, you remember how it used to be called global warming? And then magically the theory changed to climate change?
Sure.
The reason is it wasn't warming, but the computer models still say it is, except the satellites show it's not.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?
Drill, baby, drill. Drill, baby, drill.
You can have the best capitalism and global capitalism in the world, but if people are dead, they're dead. It's over.
Enough is enough. The world is at a breaking point. Catastrophic climate change, biosphere collapse, and a global energy crisis have been met with apathy, denial, and despair.
It is going to take everything we know and love.
Like clockwork, our corporate overlords present us with two untenable options. Submit to an Orwellian itinerary of energy rationing and population control, or ride the status quo into the abyss. Both sides are right, and both sides are wrong, which means both sides are missing a critical piece of the puzzle.
Since the early 2000s, we have seen an increasing number of unauthorized and or unidentified aircraft or objects in military-controlled training areas and training ranges and other designated airspace.
Some of them appeared to remain stationary in winds aloft, move against the wind, maneuver abruptly, or move at considerable speed without discernible means of propulsion. That's pretty intriguing.
I think I would, without discernible means of propulsion, I would say that we're not aware of any adversary that can move an object without discernible means of propulsion.
The phrase unidentified flying object is a deliberately obfuscating term. What it really is an alternative energy and propulsion device. This is the real reason for the secrecy. These technologies, if they were disclosed, would end fossil fuels, pollution, and poverty overnight, and usher in a new era of abundance, freedom, and peace. Instead, they have been kept secret for over 100 years. Dr. Stephen Greer, the world's leading expert on UFOs and extraterrestrial intelligence, has been advising presidents and heads of state for 30 years on the urgency of the situation. We don't have much time left.
The 12th century is literally 100 years, more than that now, of technologies that have existed that have vanished. I mean, I was just recently in a meeting in Washington with the people who manage the black budget of the United States. They have no access to this material because between the late 1800s and now, the ingenious inventions and sciences that could have moved us off that extinction level path that we're on have all been ruthlessly suppressed, confiscated. And the only way that's going to change, it is not going to change in Washington. It is not going to change in a large corporation. Unlikely. It's going to change by us, the people doing it. So it's about us. Let's look at this. You know what this is?
Dude, this is a fucking drone, bro. There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude.
This is an alternative energy and propulsion device. These are things that have existed all the way back into the 60s. But the one that they call the Tic Tac here off the coast of San Diego, the white one, looked very much like this. These have been made by the Lockheed Skunk Works. And my favorite letter of all time, the head of the Lockheed Skunk Works, Ben Rich, look at the date on it, 1986. It was an answer to a letter someone wrote and says, are these UFOs man-made or extraterrestrial? He says, many of our man-made UFOs are really unfunded opportunities, meaning if it was released for public use, it'd be an enormous industry. Every meeting I go in Washington, I said, see that thing you guys are all talking about? That's Lockheed Skunk Works.
They have left us behind, and everything we see out in our world today is absolutely a construct. It's an absolute construct. The internal combustion engines are obsolete. The nuclear power plants are obsolete. The coal fire plants are obsolete. We have the wind generators, those are obsolete. The solar power, it's all obsolete. If we could follow the gravity research that the contractors and research institutions have been doing, we could see that bright future as well.
So a lot of people say, well, how is this thing moving? There's no fuel on board. There's no nuclear power plant. There's no jets and no rockets. Well, way back in the 40s, Dr. Casimir, he predicted, and later it was proven in the 50s, what's called the zero-point energy field.
Zero-point energy, or what Nikola Tesla called radiant energy, is the most profound and transformative gift that the quantum world offers us. The seemingly empty vacuum of space is actually a roiling sea of virtual particles fluctuating in and out of existence, and all those fluctuations require energy. If we could tap into this energy source, we would unlock a virtually unlimited reservoir of clean, free energy. Extraterrestrial spacecraft are known to harness zero-point energy.
The U.S. scientists is understanding what this was. It was an energy device that used zero-point energy. That's what they referred it to as zero-point energy. And it was connected in such a manner that this device could power, from a very small flashlight or a very small watch up to a city. And power was determined by what the demand on it was.
The implications of free energy go far beyond bringing monthly electric bills to zero or running a car without gasoline. Most of the cost of making anything, from growing food to building a skyscraper, is the energy of pulling raw materials out of the ground, shipping, processing, shipping again, and so on. If the cost of energy goes to zero, the cost of agriculture and manufacturing becomes negligible. Other critical solutions, like water desalination to end drought or air purification, both of which are prohibitively expensive due to energy costs, would suddenly become viable in a free energy paradigm. A new world where humans live in perfect harmony with nature is possible within our lifetimes. But this would mean the end of oil, gas, and coal, as well as the centralized power grid and the global macroeconomic system, which will stop at nothing to protect the hundreds of trillions of dollars at stake.
The consequences of keeping all this secret. We are in the process right now of doing something that I've termed planeticide, the deliberate killing of an entire planet with malice aforethought through greed and stupidity and power. All the damage we're going to see in a few minutes, totally avoidable. Every bit of it since the 1920s at least. And we can prove this.
I'm afraid that the term planeticide is all too real. The ecocide doesn't really say it. We are in the process of destroying the biosphere, destroying a habitable world for certainly the majority of the animals on the planet. I'm an older guy. I won't be around to see the worst of this, but I have not just trepidation, but terror at what's going to be faced by my son's generation and the generations that come after him.
When someone asks me how bad is the crisis, I kind of don't know where to begin. Because what does that even mean? Does it mean what is the threat to humanity? Have we reached some kind of tipping point? Or certain things that get under my skin? or that especially alarm me. And one of them is the insect holocaust, for lack of a better word. The precipitous decline in the number of insects, the number of species, the total biomass of insects. A lot of studies put that decline at 80%. When I was a child, when we went on a long drive, especially in the summer, like we'd have to have the windshield wipers on from time to time to clear off the bug splatter. Like you just don't have that anymore. Insects are like the foundation of the terrestrial food chain. Like you can't have a thriving ecosystem without thriving insects.
This is the sixth great extinction that's happening on the planet, and it's 100% man-made, all of it. We have to all awaken, because of what's happened, I think we're like a frog being boiled slowly. And suddenly we're going to wake up and find out, it's too late. 150 species every day go extinct. Now, these aren't all animals, they're all kinds of species.
The planet has been dying at human hands for a long time. A naturalist I like, J.B. McKinnon, he calls the world a 10% world as kind of a poetic expression of how much life has declined. So there's maybe 10% of the whales that there were 500 years ago, and the seabirds and the wetlands and the mangrove swamps, and the fish biomass. We don't even know what we have lost, although in some level we feel it. This is part of the despair, part of the alienation and the anguish that sensitive people feel.
Ice caps are melting. The oceans are certainly going to rise. It could rise as much as 20 feet if we have the big ones melt.
This is all the way back in 1958. And there was a full-page color ad in Life magazine. Everybody was reading Life magazine at the time. And it's by an oil company which was the predecessor of Exxon, which was called Humble. Each day, Humble supplies enough energy to melt 7 million tons of glacier. Here they're bragging about it in 1958. So this company gets rebranded as Exxon in the 1970s. And in July 1977, they have a meeting inside Exxon headquarters where their chief scientist, James Black, is showing slides that are warning that burning fossil fuels are going to eventually endanger all of humanity. They know this in 1977. Present thinking holds that man has a time window of 15 years before the need for hard decisions regarding changes in energy strategies might become critical. Well, those 15 years were up in the early 1990s.
Look at this. How long ago was it recognized that this was a disaster? Senior scientist Exxon, 45 years ago. And actually it was known before then. This is insanity. This is a civilization gone mad.
These companies have really not been held accountable. We've lived in a fossil fuel economy now for more than 100 years. And it's just been accelerating. The amount of wealth has been increasing. You have situations now where the head of ExxonMobil goes on to become the Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson under President Trump.
And I'm an environmentalist. A lot of people don't understand that. I think I know more about the environment than most people.
So there is really very little accountability that exists.
Many scientists, such as myself, have discovered that there are very concerted, well-oiled machines that provide false information, even to scientific and academic programs. It's called capture, where they try to rationalize away this problem and everything's fine.
One company, Exxon alone, has funded more than 40 different groups to keep alive its campaign to deny the worst impacts of climate change. There was a guy named Martin Hoffert, and he's a professor of physics at New York University, a consultant to Exxon for their climate modeling during the 1980s. And he said this:
the advertisements that Exxon ran in major newspapers raising doubt about climate change were contradicted by the scientific work we had done and continued to do. Exxon was publicly promoting views that its own scientists knew were wrong, and we knew that because we were the major group working on this. This was immoral and has greatly set back efforts to address climate change.
Here's a case where the Canadian government ordered the scientists not to disclose the extent of it. So what you get in the media is a very sanitized version of this problem, which many people believe we may have already gone over the edge.